Hi guys, today we're going to talk about conflict in literature. We've already been discussing this as we've been reading rules together. So I wanted to go over all of the different types of conflict that we may see as we are reading different novels. Now every novel doesn't have every type of conflict involved, but we want to know all the different types so we can identify them as we are reading. So I'm going to go ahead and present my screen to you. Okay, so what is conflict in a story, first of all? Conflict in a story is your problem, your tension. It's your good versus evil that you'll see in a story. So whenever you have some sort of a problem or some sort of tension between people or between different characters, it's going to show conflict. Again, a story can have many different conflicts. So it doesn't have to be just one conflict per story. Usually a story is going to have one major conflict and lots of other little conflicts to go along with it, but there's usually more than one conflict in a story. Why is conflict important? Because you know what? Without conflict, you don't have a plot. You don't have a story to tell. You have to have some sort of problem or tension in order to tell a good story. Your plot is created around that conflict. It's introduced in our rising action. It's faced head on during our climax. It works itself out during the falling action, and it's resolved in our resolution. Again, that's that plot mountain we've been talking about. We've talked about the plot mountain start with the exposition to set up the story, your characters, your setting, your major problem overall. So then it's kind of introduced in that part as it's rising up in the rising action. And then it's going to come head to head at the climax of the story. That major problem is going to be faced. And then it's going to work itself out as the story starts to end. And at the very end of the story, it will be resolved. Types of conflict we have. First, we have what's called external conflict. This is a conflict between a character and an outside force. Man versus man, man versus nature, man versus society. These are the three types of external conflicts. So first, let's take a look at man versus man. That means we have a conflict where a character struggles with another character. It's kind of your protagonist versus your antagonist, your good guy versus bad guy. Your protagonist is usually your good guy, your antagonist is the bad guy. Some examples of that would be Harry Potter. In Harry Potter has a conflict constantly with Draco Malfoy. Harry Potter's the good guy, he's the protagonist. Draco Malfoy is the antagonist, always doing different things to make Harry look bad. That's a man versus man conflict. Man versus nature. This is when a character struggles with a force of nature, such as a natural disaster like a tornado or an earthquake or a hurricane, desolation, animals, etc. Usually the character is struggling in some way to survive overall. An example of that would be in Jaws. I'm going to date myself here and use an old movie, but in Jaws, the main character, Martin Brody, is faced off with a shark, the shark named Jaws, and the conflict is between the two of them. So that is a man versus nature situation. Man versus society. In this conflict, a character or a group of characters fight against the society in which they live in. They're usually fighting against social traditions or rules. So you're fighting for freedoms, for rights, for a cause, etc. Society kind of becomes a character on its own. It's usually used to comment on positive or negative aspects of real society, such as using satire. For example, the Hunger Games. Katniss versus the Capitol. That is a man versus society situation. She's fighting against the freedoms and rights that the Capitol has taken away from them. And again, that's kind of focusing on some of the aspects of our real society. We have a society that does make rules for us and does have different things that we don't necessarily agree with. So it's kind of making fun of a little bit of that as well. So man versus society means that the character is fighting against those people that make those rights, those freedoms. You're fighting for a cause overall. Internal conflict. That's when a person the character has a conflict within themselves. Man versus self would be the only internal conflict that we have for internal. So to talk about that, the character struggle takes place in his or her own mind. Basically, it has something to do with a choice, choosing between right and wrong, or may have to do with overcoming some emotions or mixed feelings overall. So if you think of the movie Tangled, Rapunzel had a man versus self situation all the time. She was struggling within herself between right and wrong. Should she stay in the tower or should she defy her mother and leave the tower? So that was a struggle she had within herself. That's man versus self. Other types of conflict we can have: man versus supernatural, such as ghosts, gods, monsters, spirits, aliens, etc. Again, I'm going to date myself here. I'm going to talk about the movie Gremlins. I love the movie Gremlins. And the main character, Billy, has a conflict with the little creature that he bought, this cute little creature he bought that turns into this nasty fighting type of creature. And it's a monster. So that's a man versus supernatural type of situation. Man versus fate. You're fighting for a choice, fighting against destiny. Right away, I always think of Star Wars because it's always Luke's destiny. Luke is fighting his destiny. Does he join the dark side, or does he stay with the rebel forces and the Jedi? So that is a man versus fate situation. And then man versus technology. So computers, machines, etc. Mrs. Hines has had a huge conflict with technology this past week, getting Edpuzzle to work. That's a big man versus technology conflict. Coming from movies, I think of the Terminator. So the main character, Sarah Connor, has a conflict with the Terminator himself, who is a machine created by man. So that would be a man versus technology conflict. All right. We will be studying conflict throughout our reading of rules and throughout all of our novels that we read this year. So we're going to talk about all these different kinds of conflict when they come up, and we're going to see what types of conflicts they are, and hopefully we can put them into the correct categories. All right, guys, have a great day.